It's amazing what kind of films you can pull off when you're willing to work within the sandbox of resources you already have access to and strengths that you have as a filmmaker. That's the approach I took with my last short film, Datsuzoku here. Believe it or not, we made this thing with only 3 people working on set for 3 days. I think we pulled off a pretty big vision for such a tiny film. So in this video, I'm going to cover everything about making this film, from writing, pre-production, shooting it, color, and VFX, and then at the end I'll tell you the cost of the film and my key takeaways from this whole project. So here's the Cliff Notes version of how I wrote this thing. It started out with a Japanese sound effects and music company reaching out, wanting to work together. We decided to make a short film. I was thinking in my head, what's a story about Japan that I could tell that would really show off some of their best sound effects and music? Oh, I almost went to Japan, but because of COVID, that trip got canceled, and that was a real bummer. Then I thought about it more, hadn't written anything yet, but this is why I always say, even when you're not writing, if your project is top of mind, that counts as writing. Sometimes you just gotta let things simmer for a while, then the idea hits you, and then you're good to go. And I think that's what happened. I had the realization that, hey, even though I didn't go to Japan, didn't I get everything that I wanted from that trip to Japan because of COVID and that breaking up my routine? Then the gears started turning, that word routine kept sticking in my head, and I found Datsuzoku, which is this Japanese idea that when you break up your routine, creativity and resourcefulness emerge, and it was like heaven sent. After that, I wrote it out. It came together pretty quick. I had like 4 storylines going throughout the film. The main storyline was going to Japan, and then there's 3 other storylines that weave throughout the film and come together at the end. So that would be falling in love with girlfriend, filmmaking, and cats. And then at the end, I wanted them all to come together. Like I got everything that I wanted without going to Japan. At this point, everything was looking good, but something still was missing. I felt like I didn't have a hook in the beginning, and I didn't have an ending that felt full circle enough. And then it hit me, I need a visual metaphor that sums up how I'm feeling in this film. And if I can make that also work as the hook and as the ending, I'm golden. And I don't know where the idea for the Newton's Cradle came from, but it was perfect. Just summed up everything, and I knew that if I dropped the ball and the other balls didn't swing back, I would have you hooked in the first like 5 seconds. So once that last piece came together, I felt very confident about the script, even though it was like a second draft, and started getting ready to produce this thing. So I needed a DP I could trust to do a great job and elevate this thing visually, but also somebody who was willing to work in a very run and gun fashion, because I knew this was going to be a small production. It was just going to be a few of us on set because we're filming in my house, little tiny rooms. It just wouldn't make sense to have a big team around, and it would cost too much money. Very quickly I settled on the DP I wanted, Topher, who ended up shooting this thing. We had communicated over DM a while back. We were fans of each other's work, but we had never met up or worked together before. After we read the script, we had like an hour-long phone call about how we were going to tackle this thing, and he had some great thoughts about how to handle it. Next, I just needed a PA, production assistant. Fortunately, PAs aren't too hard to come by, especially if you're actually paying your PAs. So between the 2 people I got, they were able to cover all 3 days, having 1 PA on set each day. So that was it. I had fully cast, I had fully crewed up. Now it was just time to start getting the props together, start shot listing this thing, scheduling the shoot, what's the most efficient way to shoot this thing in terms of order of shots, and then buying a few random little props and pieces of gear we were gonna need. Actually, one of the things I was most worried about with this film was me being the main actor, because in the past when I've had to direct myself, I'm the worst actor to work with, and I demand that we do like 100 takes of every shot. But I think that's an area where actually all these YouTube videos have helped me out a lot, because I didn't have that problem on this at all. But what I did have to do was trust my DP a lot. Normally I'm looking at playback a lot of the time, but we were moving pretty fast here and I didn't want to be doing playback between every shot. So I didn't. I just trusted him for the most part. But I would look at playback for specific parts where I knew the edit was going to have some requirements, like for match cuts, for example. And we became an effective little unit. We were moving really quick. Some strategy that we had going into this was to combine all of our V-mount batteries together so that we could battery power most of the lights throughout the whole day. That meant when we had to move lights around, we didn't have to plug and unplug anything. We could just pick up the little stand and move it, and that was it. Another strategy we had to that end was to prioritize our shots based on lighting as opposed to framing. So for example, in a shot like this, where we're working with just the sunlight, we moved this hammock around to a place where the sun was going to be doing something interesting. For interior shots too, like this shot could have taken place anywhere in the house really. We had this bright window light coming in, and we just didn't have to do much. It was just pretty much set up to go. Same for all this Japanese garden stuff. You know, we didn't go into this with any shots planned out. For recreating sunlight for shots like this, we were using my Godox M600 bi-light. That's the same one that I used in the Little Helpers for recreating the sunlight. You put the Fresnel lens on there and it's just awesome to blast through a window and it looks exactly like sunlight, and you can change the color temperature like we did here. We warmed it up. And again, right here, one of the flashiest lighting setups in the whole thing, we got that M600 by light out here outside the window, and we've got the small rig RC120B light out here too. We matched up their color temperatures to be a little warmer, and we just blasted them through, and we filled up that living room with fog as much as possible. By the way, the fog machine broke halfway through filming this sequence and I was freaking out. Eventually I got it to work just by cutting off a tube, and somehow it worked, but it wouldn't stop shooting fog. So it was just like, plug it in, unplug it immediately, because it's just gonna keep spewing out fog. But yeah, I do recommend for your own productions, if you're gonna use fog, maybe don't use the $20 used fog machine that you got off Craigslist 3 years ago and kept outside in your backyard the whole time. Might not be in great shape. We had to plan this one out a bit because we needed to do this match cut from day to night on a totally different day, but pretty easy. Just filmed it towards the end of the day when it was already blue hour pretty much. And then we took the light away from the window, took the diffusion away from the window back here. We let the natural evening light come through, and then we turned on all of our practicals. Another thing that was super handy for this film was this. This is like a projection light mount. It's a Bowens mount, it goes in front of any light. And then you can actually cut the light with these little wedges that go inside, or you can use these little discs that have different shapes cut into them. They're called gobos. You slide those in, and then you can get like a window shape. Very cool. I wish we'd used it more actually. One of the only times we really got to use it was for this to-do list stuff. We actually shot this at night. This was one of the last things that we shot. Small rig light with this thing on it, giving us that slit of light, a little bit of fill light from somewhere else, and that was it. For this section, I used what's called a snorri cam, which is like a vest that attaches to you, and you can put a camera on a rod that sticks out so that anytime you move, the camera's moving exactly with you, which gives you a pretty cool effect. In this case, using it as like a video game perspective. Anytime I moved around, I was afraid I was gonna slam the camera into a wall or break a window or something, but that's why you got spotters on set. That's what your PA and DP are for, you know? The short also was a little bit more VFX heavy than most of my projects, and I'll break down how I pulled off some of these. A lot of it was done with masking. So for example, the opening and closing shots right here. First, I tested it with just my iPhone, doing a quick and dirty test like this. So I held the pen here, and then I masked out that side of the frame with a clean plate, which is just that part of the frame without my hand holding a pen at the last ball. And then you can drop it, and the other balls don't move too much. All right, so this is what the After Effects project looked like. There's a lot of layers. It's a little more complicated than it needed to be. That's my fault. I got the worst possible. Like, I'm using reflective silver balls. So any movement here, like you can see the reflection of the ball next to it, and you just have to be so careful with how you're masking things out. And then of course you have these strings here that were vibrating and wobbling, and I couldn't even mask them out because they all overlap each other. Eventually I got it to look pretty much perfect, but it took 10 times longer than it should have if I had just set this up a little more smart.
Yeah, right? You was farting in bathtubs and laughing your ass off.
And then any shot in the film with my cat Louie, the big boy up here, had to be masked as well because he just did not want to be on camera. The other two guys were fine, but for him, we would have to do his shots individually because he's a bit of a diva. So he's doing his own thing up here, and I get that little moment, and that's all I get. So then I took that and I composited it over this other shot of the other two cats doing their thing. So by layering him on top, we get all three cats in the same shot. That way we get optimal cat performance on screen. And I am all about OCPOS. For this shot, we just threw a big foldable green screen behind me and keyed me out pretty easy. And then I threw like a zoom blur effect on the stock footage of an office I used for the background. There's another shot where I had to get Louie recorded separately before I sat down on the couch to film my part, and then I composited them on top of each other. Now let's talk color. I didn't have time to bring on a colorist for this film, otherwise I definitely would have. I don't consider myself a great colorist, but I can kind of get by. So we shot this on a Panasonic S1 shooting in Vlog format. So this is what all the raw footage looked like right here, kind of flat and washed out. So then usually I just throw Lumetri color on there if I'm in Premiere, and throw just a generic LUT on it just to get a ballpark idea so that I can actually edit the film. And it looks pretty good, but I knew I wanted it to feel way more larger than life. and less like a guy looking out his window in his living room here. So I colored the whole film using Film Convert, who kindly sponsored this video, by the way. They've analyzed the sensors for all the most popular cameras, so when it's time to color, you just pick your camera from their list and just get such better control than you do with Premiere's built-in color controls. They have tons of film stock emulations you can choose from. You can find the right look for your project. I went with this Kodak Vision 3 stock, and then you can choose your film grain size. So if you want 35mm Academy, that's what I used for most of the film. You could go down to Super 8 if you wanted and get like a crazy crunchy look. But they have a new feature that's very exciting that I've been waiting for, which is halation. And that's what's giving this shot and many other shots in this film that extra special pop. So here's this shot without halation. Just disgusting, right? I'm throwing up in my mouth right now, but I turn on the halation and oh my God. Crazy. Look at this wraparound of light around my shoulders here. Look at it glowing through the window. This is that kind of elevated, larger than life feeling that we wanted for this anime section. It also saved me on some shots I was a little worried about, like this shot of the rock garden here. I really wanted it and I liked the composition a lot, but it just felt a little bit plain in terms of the lighting. Having this halation just gives it a little something. I can put an extra little layer of glow on these rocks, and to me that focused my eye right there and gave it a little bit of a magical feeling, and that was enough. And if you're interested in Film Convert, they're running their Black Friday sale right now, which is about the lowest price you're gonna be able to get it, plus 10% off if you use the code STANDARD at checkout or click the link in my description. Thank you, Film Convert, for sponsoring this video and for making my short films look so nice. Back to the video. So the total cost of making this film was about $3,250. Most of that went to the crew, but then there were a lot of little odds and ends, like food for all of us, tickets to the Huntington Gardens to film the Japan footage, props, some gear, and hiring a cleaner to clean my house the day before we started shooting because I literally just did not have time when I was getting everything else ready. And I definitely could have made this film cheaper if I wanted to. I could have saved money by having volunteers or calling in favors instead of just like paying the crew a fair rate for their time, but the sponsor was funding the film, so there was no reason to do that. And also I just didn't have time to do some things myself, so I was just squirting the money hose at problems like the house cleaning thing to make it go quicker so that I could film this thing quicker and get it done quicker. One thing I want to reiterate is that I approached this film working backwards. So again, reverse engineering the filmmaking process, it lets you make better films and make them more cheaply, more easily. That's the whole basis of that short film course I made, Wrapped in 30 Days, is that you can make great work if you're willing to lean into your strengths, avoid your weaknesses, and kind of think a little bit strategically about how you're going to approach your film. So for example, with this film, I leaned into the strengths of being an editor, of sound design. So just like the way I made my last short film, The Little Helpers, both these films I only had like one line of dialogue on screen, which means I don't need to bring on a production sound mixer on set, which is going to free up a lot of budget, and it's going to let me shoot quicker because I never have to worry about sound or where the boom mic is in the shot. And it's funny, I had a month to make this film and I was making it at the same time as the launch class of my short film course, where they also have to make a short film in a month. So I felt like I was right along there with them. I was even going into the lessons and pulling references and resources from there. Like, I don't want to think about how to write a call sheet email right now. I'm just going to copy the one from my course. Made things so much easier. So it's fun to just use my own course now to make films, but it's just a handy reference. And if you want to take your filmmaking to the next level, check it out at wrapped.school. I'm actually building out a short film editing course for that right now, which I think is going to elevate the whole Wrapped program a lot once it's finally done. But when it comes time to think about making your next film, I really encourage you to think about, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How can I lean into the one and avoid the other, or hire people to make up for my lack of strengths in those departments? How can I use the resources that I have to tell the story? You know, that lets you make bigger, better films for free, and it's so much easier to produce. All I had to do for this thing was bring on a DP and a PA. We were shooting in my house, and most of the rest was already done because it was about me and it's here in this house. If you open your mind to these possibilities and you get creative with the sandbox that you have in front of you, you can still tell amazing stories, moving stories. It doesn't need to be set in a sci-fi colony on Mars for it to be a cool sci-fi movie. You could do a sci-fi movie in your house if you're willing to think creatively like that.
The robots are self-aware.
Indeed.
The love robots. Do they know?
And the last thing I want to say Releasing this short film on like the same day I hit 200,000 subscribers on here was a beautiful little moment, and I really want to thank all of you for following along on these videos and these films. I can't tell you how much it means to me, and there's going to be a lot more better films coming soon, more helpful videos coming soon. 2024 is going to be a lot of fun, I promise you, so stay tuned. Thank you. See y'all next time.